It's alive! Okay, Jeremiah says he's ready 4 minutes ago.
Where?
Jeremiah, I'm not sure where he is.
On YouTube? He says he's ready. Where is he? All right.
I think probably doing like in the past where he just sends messages.
Yeah. You might be on the wrong one now. On the read. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Tolkien Society this September 18th,
Yes.
2021. We're here in the studio, the RPG Research Studios in Spokane, Washington, and joining us remotely from Italy.
Hi.
I'm Hawk Robinson, president and founder.
I'm Brian Hughesland, secretary of the Smile.
I'm Corey Newkirk, been here for what, 4 years?
I'm Anthony Cassette of the East Farthing.
He's saying he's from Boston, right?
And tell Sarah, tell them your name and location where you are. Sarah?
Sarah?
You hear us?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm Sara. I'm from Verona, Italy. And I'm a member of a Tolkien group here in Verona. And I enjoy this group of this group.
We really enjoy your joining. And you know, it's very late where you are, so we really appreciate your dedication. Very much. Okay, so Brian, as you know, I'm going to hand it off to you guys to
See you a little.
yeah, so I'll see you later.
Okay.
Go ahead and read the notes and do your thing. Letters is right there if you need it.
Okay, I think we're all good.
Good. All right,
Yeah,
and I'll
thank you
be
so much.
online.
All right, thank you, Hawk.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Sarah, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. We'll have to speak loudly.
Yeah.
Very small stick. Well, so hopefully Jeremiah can get on soon. I think he's going to join us, and maybe other people who might be listening as well. I probably should bring up. You have access to the YouTube channel to see if there's little comments.
Yes.
Okay, great.
The
So I'm gonna
Tolkien Scholars?
delegate that to you. Gotta keep track of the live stream if there's any comments there.
Sure.
Thank you. Just to make sure that the volume's off so we don't have feedback. Yeah, so welcome Corey, Anthony, Sarah, and also I think Jeremiah. And of course Hawk as well, our founder. So we are going to just go over the notes for August from last month. So Hawk, Chris, Sarah, and Corey were there attending. I was gone on vacation, so on holiday, as was Anthony.
Yes,
You were
at Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. I was at Priest Lake. So I did watch the video this morning actually, just because I never took the notes, so I had to quick look it up and watch and see. You guys had a very nice discussion. But Hawk read the July notes of the when we had our Tolkien Moot panel with Sean Marchese, and of course Zara, you were in the Tolkien Moot panel 2 years ago, or a year ago actually. So you had the chance. I think Sean was on as well then. So it was a lot of fun a year ago, and then this summer was also really great. And so the topics that were covered in the August meeting were, first of all, the Amazon news that as of August 12th, that Amazon Prime, and they haven't really come up with a name for it yet, but the working title was basically Amazon Lord of the Rings, but it's it's this obviously Middle Earth show that they have been working on, and they're filming season 2 in the United Kingdom instead of New Zealand. Season 1 streams in September, a year from now. Zara, you mentioned Kullervo, that you've been reading Finnish saga, that the story about this kind of anti-hero, and Tolkien's source for the Turin Turambar story, and also the Finnish influence on Elvish languages. So, and also discussing, so you discussed also the Tolkien's rewrites. For example, in Farmer Giles of Ham, he wrote that, wanting to just kind of have a real, truly English, I guess, legendarium or storyline, and instead of ones that were maybe derivative, like Arthur, which much of Arthur is French, instead of the original, Welsh roots to that.
Darn those French.
No.
How long has Britain been at war with them?
No.
Hey,
It's the Pax Romana. Okay, let's see. So Tolkien's other references to the Kalevala, and then Tolkien's uniqueness as a writer by being one of the first fantasy authors to invent his languages for a fictional world. And so you explored, I think one letter was letter 163, of the letters of j.r.r. Tolkien, because he talked a lot about his languages there. And then just a few quotes I enjoyed. Zara, you said that he wanted to create something like those stories. So these were inspiration for him. And then Hawk said that he blazed his own trail. He started with language first, and that led to story, the rest of the story, which was unusual. A lot of people will write up the story and then they'll invent the language afterwards. Corey, you mentioned the reason why Tolkien's so brilliant is because he was just a little off of the rest of us and could therefore be original. And then Chris had mentioned the fact that you guys were talking, somehow you'd gotten on to discussion of Japanese interest in Western mythology. I think it was in an anime.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how that's similar to their imitation of technology and improvement, like the flintlock gun, taking something that somebody else had kind of like an import and improving it. And so Chris said that that's what they've been doing for 1,000 years. And then you read letter 186 of j.r.r. Tolkien, which was a discussion of how the Lord of the Rings is not about atomic power. And there's a great quotation from Tolkien, which was, "If there is any contemporary reference in my story at all, it is to what seems to me the most widespread assumption of our time, that if a thing can be done, it must be done. This seems to me wholly false." And I wanted to, there's one more quote here.
Sounds like Jurassic Park.
Well, yes.
Or Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Actually, this is a very great, a great quotation, because I was thinking just yesterday I was listening to a discussion on using CRISPR or it had to do with basically being able to do genetic testing of embryos that are in test tubes, and being able to determine facts about them in order to choose which baby you wanted to have. And anyway, at the end of this discussion, one of the people said that, well, we have to figure this out. We have to figure out the ethics and kind of a new way of thinking about this, because you can't stop the science. The science is happening, so we have to come up with something new. And I thought Tolkien would kind of respond differently, because he would say, not necessarily that the science is happening, so we just have to move with it. But here he's saying, if a thing can be done, it must be done. That, he said, is kind of a false idea. You still need to evaluate if it can be done, should it be done, ought it to be. So
I think there was somebody who made a parallel saying that if you live in a glass house, if you just restrain yourself from trying to throw things in a glass house so you won't break anything, So it's the idea that it's fragile, but why is it that we go out of the way to
Also,
innovate?
yeah,
Right.
when it comes to technology too, like I feel like technology is progressing at such a rate that, for example, Apple keeps coming out with a new iPhone in a single year. Like just because it's a new thing doesn't mean you have to necessarily adopt it.
That's true.
I bet Hawk knows about this, but
Yeah.
I had my own talk show all about technology and its impact on privacy, security, and civil rights called Tech Talk with Hawk for many
Really?
years. Yeah,
Nice.
both FM radio and internet
That would have been fun to
from
listen
2004 to 2007.
to.
Oh,
Very,
nice.
very waiting time.
Yeah, it's that's still on techtalkhawk.com.
Nice.
There's about 60 episodes.
Yeah. But are we having some sound issues still?
It's still kind of quiet, even though everything's cranked up and showing it's loud on
yeah,
YouTube. It's quiet,
Jeremiah says he can.
but it's quiet. Trying to get it a little more.
Mhm.
Just keep going. Don't mind
Okay.
me.
Any comments from Jeremiah yet?
So he just says,
Okay. All right. Well, I'll finish up the notes then.
Jeremiah says Tolkien likely wouldn't think of test tube progress to begin with, but I am reminded of his comment about being against progress for progress.
Oh, interesting.
Where he
Again,
says that.
yeah, that'd be interesting. Can Jeremiah give a source for that?
Well, there's a lot of people that still use the whole Galileo reminder that supposedly religion was a impeder of progress.
Right.
So there's that to deal with. There's a lot
Sure.
of people look at Tolkien as if he's
Right.
what do they call it? I don't even know the word for it. Luddite, is that the word I'm looking
Yeah,
for?
to some extent. I mean, it's complicated with Tolkien. He sometimes
Yeah.
represented himself
He
as
was
one
more
way.
nuanced.
He was the whole thing about him driving a car, for
Yeah, and
example.
using it.
But I think definitely it was very reluctant user. Yes.
Well, he always used to make fun of how the stacks at the factories with the smoke pouring out of them, and
Yes.
then he looks at a tree and he says, "These trees are way more amazing than the factory stack," or something in those lines. I
Sure.
can't say it properly.
Yeah, he represents a kind of a rebellion against the Industrial Revolution in some ways. But okay, applicability versus allegory was discussed, and then you read letter 187 regarding the maps of Middle Earth and the grammar of languages. I have to read this whole quote because this was from the letter, and it was just so wonderful. This is from Tolkien. But the problems, delightful if I had time, which the extra volume will set. Not sure which extra volume he's referring. Were they planning like
the
appendices?
The appendices one.
Oh.
Remember, he's talking about he needed a
Right.
Oh yeah.
And then he
It
had
wasn't appendices. He was talking about volume.
and then it ended
It
up having.
became part of the last line.
So do we have like a rough draft of that whole thing?
I don't know.
appendices?
I don't
Of
know
the
if we have.
appendices?
Well, no, I
Of
mean
the enlarged one before it became just.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Okay,
don't
it's
know.
probably in Tolkien's
Because
history. The Lord. Of
in the
Lord.
Memorial Edition. It is a separate book. Each book
Oh.
is separated.
Got it. Okay.
That's a lot of.
So we're
That's
talking
7
about that.
books.
Which the extra volume will set. The problems will seem clear if I tell you that while many like you demand maps, others wish for geological indications. Hawk, when you come back down in like an hour or so, if you come down, would you be?
I won't be coming.
I'll come up and get something then.
Oh, you need a bottle. I'll go get one right
Well, or I can come.
now or never. So.
Okay. Want me to? Maybe Anthony could come up and to the top of the stairs if that'd be
No,
easier.
I'll be.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it's just to open the bottle. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, I better start over. But the problems, delightful if I had time, which the extra volume will set, will seem clear if I tell you that while many like you demand maps, others wish for geological indications rather than places. Many want Elvish grammars, phonologies, and specimens. Some want metrics and prosodies, not only of the brief Elvish specimens, but of the translated verses in less familiar modes, such as those written in the strictest form of Anglo-Saxon alliterative verse, e.g. the fragment at the end of the Battle of the Pelennor, volume, book 5, chapter 6, page 124. Musicians want tunes and musical notation. Archaeologists want ceramics and metallurgy. Botanists want a more accurate description of the Malorn, of Alanor, Nifredil, Alfirin, Malorn, Malos, and Cymbalmine. And historians want more details about the social and political structure of Gondor. General inquirers want more information about the Wainwriters, the Harad, Dwarvish origins, the Dead Men, the Beornings.
Beornings, yeah.
Beornings.
Hey,
Oh, don't start me in the Shame and Shaman thing.
oh, that too. Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh yeah.
And the missing 2 wizards out of 5. Be a big volume, even if I attend only to the things revealed to my limited understanding.
Holy
Wow.
cow! Yeah,
That's quite a paragraph.
you don't see that in, TV shows and stuff nowadays. You don't see that kind of detail. Looking for that kind of depth behind the scenes, or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, outside of the screen of the camera. It just seems like, it's like the bad, what do you call it? Gunman shows where
Yes.
all the sets are. It seems like all the sets are just really fragile, and bullet knocks one over or
Like
whatever.
a facade and
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
spaghetti western.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like when other people do.
Yes. Well, he liked to leave some mystery, didn't he? So did C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it for the notes.
Fandom.
Yes. Next, I remember when that wasn't even a word yet.
That's right.
Fandom? Really?
Fandom. Yeah. No,
Yeah, that's a more
distinctly.
recent- that's
I
a more recent
remember
thing.
before. You can give it to.
Oh,
Yep. Yep.
The word fan
And you want
was
me to get you
not.
some paper cups?
No, we've got enough glass. I brought.
Okay.
Isn't the word fan?
Did you want to stay? I'm
derived
just
from-
about to break it down.
Right, but fandom,
Right, but
as in-
the original word was derived from
Fanatic.
fanatic.
fanatic, yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's
Gone a
usually had a
long way.
negative. It's
was that?
still to this day has a negative connotation. Those are inside the fan bubbles. They keep, fine with it. Those outside the fan.
fan bubbles a lot, just like any
Whatever you're
Fantasy.
a fan of.
Star Wars or
Yeah. Well, there's the geek culture bubble. A whole bunch of different subcultures. The geek culture bubble. There's everybody outside the geek culture bubble, which is the majority of the population. Those inside the geek culture bubble think it's much larger than, even though it is growing and very large. Most people inside the geek culture bubble.
yeah.
Well,
Those outside the geek culture bubble
I
usually are
laugh.
very negative about those.
Yeah.
you know that
I got
Stephen
to the
Colbert
time.
makes himself out to be a Tolkien scholar, but I don't think he's as much of a Tolkien scholar as he makes himself out to be.
He's done pretty well in the quizzes.
Is this?
What did you want me? It's
No.
apple grape.
Yeah, no, all right.
So we're
Yeah.
just going to pour a glass, Sarah, if you and Jeremiah, if you wait, hold on. If we wanted to, this is for Frodo and Bilbo's birthday, and your dad's birthday. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I do have an extra one, Hawk. If you,
No.
All right. So, anyway, we want to raise a glass for Frodo and Bilbo's birthday.
My first day of
Proud
Hip, hip,
feet!
hooray. Proud feet.
And all the way across the country.
Yes. Yes. Would you like a refill, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Oh, not to be
I
bothered.
want a pint.
Pint?
They come in pints.
I'm getting one.
Is yours?
Yes.
Exactly. Well, we do thank Hawk for not only hosting our meeting, but also for starting many, many years ago.
Yes.
About a score, maybe, of years ago.
To Hawk.
To Hawk.
Professor Hawk.
Professor Hawk. Any happy returns?
Yes. Cheers, Hawk.
Yay!
One more to our friends in distant places.
Yes, Sarah.
Sarah. It's a good thing this is not alcoholic, actually. So, you've got some already.
Take a sip every time you have to read a notation by just,
We're trying to be
Tolkien.
like hobbits, right? To Jeremiah and Zara and
Yep.
all the friends around the world who are Tolkien appreciators and
Bless you.
Yes, bless you.
Cheers.
Okay. I will just put it over here. All right.
Now that we're properly hornswoggled, is that the word?
Our libations.
Yes.
Okay. All right. On with the
The show must go on.
show must go on. So, yeah, all it was left was on the notes was just next meeting will be September 18, 2021, which is today. And we will read letter 188 next and celebrate Frodo and Bilbo's birthday 2 days early. So, here.
Here.
So, wondering if
Where's the fireworks?
Yeah.
we have if Zara and Jeremiah have a copy of Letters of Tolkien, or I can email you the section we're reading. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, because I don't have the letters in English. I only have them in Italian.
Oh, I'm sure they sound even better.
Oh yeah.
Especially this next part is because he's talking all about the translation and translating the Lord of the Rings into different languages. So yes. Oh boy. Okay, this is letter 188. I'll send this to you. Hold on a minute. Aha, here we go. Okay, just a second. This should work. Here is letter 188. See if that comes through. So let me know when you get that.
Yes, I have it.
Okay, great. So, Free or Anthony would want.
188.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Letter 188 from Letter to Alan and Unwin, April 3rd, 1956. In March, Alan and Unwin told Tolkien that they had signed an agreement for a Dutch edition of. Tolkien replied that this was the first he had heard of such a proposal, asked to be told more. Publishers answered that they were making all possible efforts to sell foreign rights and asked for confirmation that Tolkien wanted them to do so. Tolkien says, "Of course, I wish you to pursue your efforts with regard to foreign editions. It is, however, surely intelligible that an author, while still alive, should feel a deep and immediate concern in translation. And this one is, unfortunately, also a professional linguist, a pedantic don, who has wide personal connections and friendships with the chief English scholars of the continent. The translation of The Lord of the Rings will prove a formidable task. Do not see how it can be performed satisfactorily without the assistance of the author."
Are they saying something about cutting him out or something? Is that the
Well,
reason why
they made an agreement without asking him. He's probably worried.
Well, in the footnote it says, "By assistance, I do not, of course, mean interference, though the opportunity to consider specimens would be desirable. My linguistic knowledge seldom extends beyond the detection of obvious errors and liberties to the criticism of the niceties that would be required. But there are many special difficulties in this text. To mention one, there are a number of words not to be found in the dictionaries, or which require a knowledge of older English. On points such as these, and others that would inevitably arise, the author would be most satisfactory and the quickest source of information. Back to the letter. That assistance I am prepared to give promptly if I am consulted. I wish to avoid a repetition of my experience with the Swedish translation of The Hobbit. I discovered that this had taken unwarranted liberties, text and other details, without consultation or approval. It was also unfavorably criticized in general by a Swedish expert familiar with the original, to whom I submitted it. I regard the text, in all its details, of The Lord of the Rings far more jealously. No alterations, major or minor, rearrangements or abridgments of this text will be approved by me, unless they proceed from myself or from direct consultation. I earnestly hope that this concern of mine will be taken account.
I think there's a note there. Did you?
Oh, sorry.
At the bottom, yeah, he did.
Oh,
The
yes.
bias system.
Well, there's another note, but that references another note.
Oh no, that's fine. Just the footnote. Not that one. Sorry, I was just trying to email the other letters.
Because Tolkien, the medium that he was dealing with was a written medium. You know, it's the same translation issues that you have from going from a literary to a visual play, like, you know, played.
Yeah, visual media.
Right, a visual meeting changes the, you know, the difficulties in translation. When I use the word translation, I use that a lot broader than just one word to one word. I'm
Right.
talking about the fact that you need to know what the intent of the author was for the specific area. But translation is a difficult thing. If anybody who's a language learner knows that you can say something in Japanese or another language that can't find a home in the English language, and vice versa.
Right.
So it's really tough because the whole point of writing The Lord of the Rings was about language, right? That desire for an English mythic language, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, well, sort of the foundation. Lord of the Rings encompasses different themes. Kind of its primary inspiration. I think Tolkien is rather. Oh, speak louder.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think inevitably something kind of gets lost in translation when you're translating from one very complex language to another, like real world language. And
Yeah.
I think especially in a work that as unique as Tolkien's, with a whole lot of names and
Yeah.
interesting, unique words.
It's not like an instruction manual on how to change the bag on a vacuum cleaner or Hoover or something like that, right?
Right. That's easy to translate, but he's dealing with poetry, mythopoetry, which
Yeah.
is a tougher. I mean, he always admitted that what he did was tougher than regular prose. He always struggled
Right.
with those things. Translation.
So I have a question, Sarah. In the last month, you all were talking about, or as I looked back and watched it, one of the things that was discussed was the fact that Tolkien could kind of get at the universal stories that, like, people from different cultures could connect with, as well as he was very local, very, he had a sense of detail. But like, how does that relate to language then with translation? Because what do you think about that? I mean, because obviously maybe there are some things that are more easily said in one's own heart language, right? Your mother tongue. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that translating Middle Earth in general is difficult because so many things are expressed from the names of the places. And for example, we have two translations now in Italian, and some of the names are different. And to be honest, none of them really express the same thing that Tolkien expresses in English. For example, Strider's name has been translated into different ways, and none of them express what really means being Strider. The translation talks about the walking fast, walking large, but there is not the sense of meaning, of purpose, walking toward something.
Yes.
It gets completely lost in translation. And it's the same thing for other names. And when you know what it means in the original name, you feel that something is lacking. So this is very difficult. I think the names are very, very difficult to translate.
Well, I think
And then there are other things because the language is a very complex things, and so of course it's difficult to translate from one language to another. But I think that regarding Middle Earth, the names are very, very difficult, and so much gets lost.
yeah, I think in letter 190, hopefully we'll get to that today. It actually talks about that with the about names the name's the same because change the names, it really changes a lot about them. So that's an interesting point.
Hawk says, "I'm sorry, Sarah's audio is still echoing. Brian, maybe one of you on the table. So one of you can turn down TV audio lower to where you
Okay.
can still hear it. But
Sure.
the echo.
TV audio.
This it?
Yes, I think so. So let me just turn down a little bit. So Sarah, the closest I can think, just because I don't really know a lot of Italian literature, which is my to my embarrassment. But I mean, would it be like trying to read Dante in English, but you're missing a lot that would be there in the original language?
I think so because the first time that a friend of mine told me that she studied Dante in English, I thought, what's the point of it? Because we consider Dante the father of the Italian language, and so I don't know. Studying it in another language is something that sounds so strange to me.
Think
And
it's really this
even
question.
even for an Italian, it's difficult to study Dante because he made um, a study on the language. He invented words that we don't use now. So I think it's very, very difficult to translate notes like Dante.
Hawk says there's still echo.
That's better down here, so I'm not. Probably the audio on. So we can do. Okay, well, thank you for that, Sarah. That's really good. Any comments from Jeremiah that he wanted to share before we move on to letter 189? Would you willing to read that next
Oh yeah,
letter?
I'll read it. Read it. I read it. Oh man, it's a little.
In the future, you have already read it.
Yeah. Isn't this just a footnote?
It's a very short one. Let's see if Jeremiah had any comments first.
I see no current comments from Jeremiah.
Okay. Well, chip in, Jeremiah. I know it's also late by you, so we appreciate the fact that both you and Sarah, it's late tonight, but we certainly can understand Tolkien's sense of ownership to his work, and I think really a question that we need to always ask. Is should you consider the author's intention when translation? And I think that by all means, especially with a creative world, a fantastical creation, it's not IKEA. You're not assembling a bookshelf here.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult because you know where the culture ends and myth begins. Where did it come from? Obviously, we still have very much older English sources that even might refer to, even if we refer to them inappropriately, not the way that it's in the dictionary. That's something that I learned when I was an English major at SPU is that Beowulf had a few words in there that I didn't understand, but they're the words I could figure out easily. I just couldn't. When it gets translated into something like French or something, it loses the grammar. Where the grammar lies, so it affects how you read from left to right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's hard too. Anyways, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I wanted to just quick ask too. I mean, so I've been teaching my fifth graders, going back and looking at what was England like before the Age of Exploration, because of course, America, the United States started as English colonies with people from all over the world, but speaking English with an English sense of law and liberty and faith, etc. And so I actually taught my students how to count to 10 in Old English, and that was a lot of fun because they listened to it, and an, toi, re, theor, if, six, sevan, yacht, nigan, tien. And the kids were like, oh, it sounds a lot like what we say now in English 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's because this is where it comes from, and these are the roots of our words. And again, like we think for them, they're trying to get their mind around that places have history, then to realize that words have history too. So not only are you trying to translate cross culture or language, but then like Sarah was saying, even back in time, so now you've got words that are old, and how do you translate something like that?
I think a good example of that would be you're a China from China, for example. It's good to use the east-west split to kind of use to make us understand like how hard translation really is, because in China there were certain places that are almost mythical, but they're so much a part of their I don't know, the stories that they're told as kids or whatever you want to call it. Not even sure. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
These things are, you can't translate them into English, and they don't make the same sense. I mean, if you said somebody who's the 10,000 talents, he had the 10,000 talents. 10,000 talents is a way that the Chinese people would say big without saying big, so to say.
Jeremiah has a couple. I think the trouble with when it comes to translation is when quote unquote spirit of the author's intent is lost.
No, thank you.
I kind of agree. Like when it comes to translating from one, you have to really, if you want to be good at translating the work, you have to really capture the author's voice. I think Tolkien has a distinctive voice when he's like narrating, for example, and when he voices of different characters. So Jeremiah also said that the Hobbit films, for example, lost a lot of the spirit of Tolkien's intent. Bilbo's journey from simple hobbit to quasi-hero, and films Bilbo largely took a backseat to Thorin's quest. Bilbo of the books was instrumental in the quest. Bilbo of the films was incidental. So I think like not only from translating from language to language, when you're translating from linguistic medium to like a literary medium, it's hard to really kind of keep the intent of the author.
That's a good point. I mean, am I understanding you correctly, Anthony, that even if you're trying, sometimes can still fail? Communicate what the author.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, which I think is really good to remember this, because any attempt at translation, whether it be to another language or from one medium to another medium, it will always lose something. It might gain something, but it's not the original. And so that kind of says that it's the opposite then of thinking that you can just easily interchange languages with no difference at all. We would say no, that each language is special and unique and has the ability to say something that maybe can't be said any otherwise.
Well,
it should make us appreciate other languages.
Right. Well, languages, I'm not saying they feel incomplete, but there would be kind of, in my opinion, this idea that if we could learn more than 3 or 4 languages, we would find that there were words in one language that didn't fit in another language.
Every language has its own nuances. Like other languages have their own characteristics that English doesn't have, and vice versa. Like for example, some other languages still have like gendered nouns and pronouns. Like I took German in college, so some of the German titles for Tolkien's works like Der Hobbit, Der Herr der Ringe, which means
Yes.
somewhere. So they kind of have masculine.
Joss Silmarillion.
Yes. Italian probably still has gendered kind of nouns and
Pronouns or
yeah.
articles. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because the Latin languages all have male and female, for the most part, and that's something that English doesn't have, which is kind of interesting.
Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
Not anymore. It used to.
Yeah, inflections.
Yeah,
Like that.
for sure. Okay, so Corey, is there anything else from Jeremiah before Corey reads?
No.
And also, you have to consider the sound of the language, because when I first read the Lord of the Rings in English, it was like, I don't know, first thing that I never imagined, because I only read in translation. And when I read the real words, it wasn't just the sense of the story, what you could read between the lines, but it was also the sound, the rhythm. It was, for example, I didn't know that Tom Bombadil talk in kind of a poetry language, because that's completely lost in Italian.
Oh,
so,
wow.
When I read it, I thought, oh God, I never imagined this.
Isn't Tom a word for turkey?
It can be the referring to the male, as opposed to female. But I think Tom Bombadillo. It's just very rhythmic and musical. So yes.
Well, see, that's the language of poetry.
Right.
Is they always want to know not just rhythm and rhyme, but whether or not they I'm sorry, I lost it. Anyways, just the fact that the rhythm and the rhyme, the structure of a poem is supposed to affect how your brain works. You're kind of playing a game with the human brain.
Right.
Like that's why we have suspense in movies.
Yes.
It kind of, that's the same thing with poetry. Is the author is trying to get something that seems not literal,
right,
passed on, some sort of truth, right? Anyways, I'm sorry, I talked too much.
Yeah, and Jeremiah says things like Tolkien's love for alliterative verse must be nigh to impossible.
That's a good question. I
I
don't know. Yeah.
So you got like a poet to difficult. Or you have to get an author who's similar to Tolkien in spirit, I feel like most translators are hired just, I don't know. I was trying to say maybe just for monetary reasons.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't pick the best candidate.
Well, okay, Corey, why don't you go ahead and read letter 189?
Well, I'm just going to say this real quick. In the English language, there's no rhyming word orange, right? We always laugh about that if you're an English speaker, because orange you can't rhyme with. But in another language, orange might be rhymable with something else, and so that's where it's tough,
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, all right, let's get on with this. 189 from a letter to Miss Wilson, 11 April 1956. I find that many children become interested, even engrossed, in the Lord of the Rings from about 10 onwards. I think it rather a pity, really. It was not written for them. He's whining about the fact that it's popular with children, huh? But when I'm I'm a very unvoracious reader. How does that work? And since I can seldom bring myself to read a work twice, I think of many things that I read too soon. Nothing, not even a possible deeper appreciation for me, replaces the bloom on a book, freshness of the unread. Still, what we read and when goes, still what we read and when goes. like the people we meet by fate. Sorry, I apologize if that was broken.
That's okay. Comments on that letter?
Yeah, I find it interesting that back then children were starting to read Lord of the Rings at a rather young age. I myself started reading around the time that when movies were coming, Jackson film. Of course, I only read parts of the 2 Hours and it wasn't really until I became an adult that I really appreciate the scope of its the magnitude. You know.
But isn't it amazing that children are willing to read his books, even though he said that they were difficult for adults?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a good.
What do you think about the word unvoracious reader there? that phrase, does that actually fit him, or?
I don't know. It seems to be kind of contradictory, really. I mean, I read a lot.
Yeah.
But I think what he means is he sees a person who reads and rereads the same books and, well, like, has all sorts of books that are beloved books. Each of us probably have certain books that we like to return to every once in a while. And he's saying that I rarely read the same book twice.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying here.
Yeah.
And he's saying, I think he's comparing himself and saying there's other people who are more voracious readers than I am, kind of love to go back to these books. But I think he's saying the first time you read a book, never happen again.
It's kind of a fresh thing. It's kind of like seeing the what's the movie with Shyamalan, the I See Dead People. Anyways, Sixth Sense. It's like the twist. Don't see the twist. You see it the first time, you don't want to ever watch the movie again, kind of thing.
Right. But you realize that if you were to rewatch it with that in mind, it would totally change how you look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't know if I agree with him here, right?
Well, I'm not either,
No,
but I think it's interesting.
Yes. I mean, this is a really good debate, actually, because on the one hand, I think that he's got a good point that when you first take in Lord of the Rings, or like Sarah was saying with reading it for the first time in English, like the impressions you get, right? Especially if you read the books before you watch the movies. And I have to say that because for a lot of look at me, young people.
You whippersnappers, get off my lawn.
Hi, Dad.
Oh, man, look what just happened there. Like, I'm almost 50 years old, okay? So, but for me, it's crazy because now, of course, it's been 20 years this year, right? Since the movies began to.
Yeah, Peter Jackson.
It came out in 2001.
2001.
Yeah, December.
Wow, an exact 20 years.
20 years. But I mean, I lived for 28 years before that without having the movies, right? So for me, I still lived more of my life for the movies than after. But I guess all I'm trying to say is this: get myself into trouble here. But
you're doing just fine.
Oh, thank you. I feel like
We'll take you out later.
Like if you watch the movies first, then obviously that's going to be your first impression of the story.
Yeah.
And then if you read them, maybe you still have the same kind of excitement. For me, I was in probably junior high. I think I was in maybe I was 13 or 14 years old when I first read The Lord of the Rings. I'd read The Hobbit long before that. So here I was returning to this world, and yet it felt like very different. I was coming back. I was older, and the people in it, everything was changing. And so it was
more
really,
of a mature tone.
Well, and the first time I read it, I stopped in the Two Towers. I actually stopped reading because I know that's. I look back.
Were you being held by Saruman
in prison?
I think I just had a very small attention span, And so there they were. Now the hobbits were captured, and now they were just kind of going across. And at that point, really everything is going like this. Frodo and Sam are going one direction.
Yeah.
You've got, Aragorn is and Gimli and
They're going
Legolas.
through where the ghosts are at. And
Well, no. This is
after they
true.
meet
Yeah.
up with the.
I mean, you've got 3 different storylines: Merry and Pippin's storyline,
Right.
and and it's just there's so much. And I think at that point, my mind wasn't just quite able to kind of follow it all, so it got a little bit bored. I'm sorry to say that, but then when I came back, and it was like I was 2 years old, 2 years later. When I was 15, 2 years later, I read it all the way through, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I read it again and again, and then in college, and then after college, and so at each stage of my life, as a kid, as a young adult, as a father, I've experienced different ways. So I guess the debate is, on the one side is, you never read it the first time twice. It's like the first time is very special, and like me before the movies, then I could get a sense of like, who do I imagine this Strider to be? Oh wow, he's actually Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And so
Yeah.
the first time you read it, you're like discovering right along with the hobbits
Right.
who everybody is.
Well, the world gets wider when
It
he
does.
meets Strider, right?
Yes.
Because all he's ever heard these from was Bilbo's writings
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
For sure. And the book, it makes him even seem a little bit more shady. Like, you know,
Yeah.
who is this guy? You know?
Well, the townspeople didn't really like him that much. You know?
Right,
So they
right.
kind of gave him this dark, foreboding.
Whereas with the movies,
presence
if
or
you were paying
whatever.
attention to all the promotional advertisements, the potato chip bag, the crisps bag already told me, you know, oh, he's one of the 9, right?
Uh-huh.
You know. So it
No.
gives it all that gives it away.
Yeah.
But when you're reading a book, so here's the other side of this debate. We read the Lord of the Rings to our children when they're 8 years old. They turn 8, then we read the Lord of the Rings to them. Now, for every one of our, 4 of our daughters, because we have 5 girls, so all of these girls, they listen to it when they're 8. You know, they like it, but they're getting it at an 8-year-old level. Then they get it when they're a teenager, and they really understand it better. They're like, oh, okay, I understand now. I didn't really get that when I was, you know, maybe the only thing they really remember when they were a kid was Gandalf died. You know, that's sad.
Well, maybe one of the reasons why Tolkien wasn't a voracious reader, according to him,
Yeah.
was because he read George MacDonald and completely ruined it for him.
The golden key.
Yes. Somewhat tarnished.
I didn't realize it was so terrible.
Well, I feel like he's a little unfair. I like some of George MacDonald because George MacDonald, some of his stories, not so much the Golden Key because it's very allegorical, but if you read The Princess and the Goblin,
Yeah, I've heard of that.
that is an amazing book.
Oh, we have a guest.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello,
Yes.
Mark and everybody. This is Gary. This time not calling from or attending from Anacortes, but from Mountain Home, Idaho.
Welcome back, Gary. It's so good to have you again. Yeah, absolutely. We hope you can come back again as well in October if you have a time. It's always the 3rd Saturday, so thank you for looking us up again.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
just to go around to remind you, Gary, who we are. We have Zara from Italy on as well, joining us. It's very late there by her. It's just gone past 11 o'clock, I think. And Corey, Self Brian, Anthony,
Yep.
and Hawk will be back in a little while. So anyway, yeah. So we're just reading letter 189 of Tolkien's letters. Do you have a copy of that with you or not, Gary?
No, I don't, and everything I've got is in boxes out in the garage.
Oh, well, I don't think I have your email, but I could send you I could send you just the text of the letter itself if you wanted. Otherwise, you can just listen in and we'll read it to you.
Let me see. I'm not the most knowledgeable of computer stuff. Plus, plus the printer's not hooked up yet. That's my wife.
Oh, don't worry about it then.
She's my IT. She's trying to fix something.
We'll just read it nice and loud for you.
Okay, thank you.
So we just finished letter 189. Could you just, it's so short, would you read it one more time,
Oh,
Corey?
sure, why not?
That way we can get Gary's perspective on this as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Jeremiah.
And Jeremiah had a comment. This is from 1956 from a letter to Mrs. M. Wilson.
Yes, I find that many children become interested, even engrossed in the Lord of the Rings from about 10 onwards. I think it rather a pity, really. It was not written for them. But then I am very unvoracious reader, and since I can seldom bring myself to read a book or read a work twice, I think of the many things that I read too soon. Nothing, not even a possible deeper appreciation for me replaces the bloom on a book, the freshness of the unread. Still, what we read and when goes, like
What we read and when.
goes, I don't know
Yep.
like the people we meet by fate.
Interesting. What was Jeremiah's comment?
Well, earlier, Jeremiah said that he appreciates Tolkien's love for the quote-unquote unread, the bloom on a book, the freshness of the unread. How many of us have said we could go back and read Rings?
Absolutely.
The
Yeah.
freshness of reading it.
Well, when you talk to someone who's just read it for the first time, it's really interesting, isn't it? What they think of.
So you're implying that we should use memory erasing technology?
Yes, absolutely. We'll start with you.
Wipe our memory banks.
Yeah.
What was that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
So we were just discussing, Gary, kind of how, and I just shared when I started reading The Lord of the Rings the first time, but then kind of there's this other side of things where I have kids and I read to them, so they understand it and appreciate it more when they come back to it when they're older. What do you think? Which side of that debate would you land on? Like, reading it the first time is really the most like the most special thing, or do you think it gets richer as you get older rereading it?
Yeah, when I read the Hobbit because that was I had a couple of weird friends, and I was at the University of Wisconsin, and they told me you got to read this book, and it was like I don't know, 1965, 66. I'm really dating myself. And I read it, and I really enjoyed the thing all the time. And then shortly after, I went into the Air Force, and I picked up, I think after I went overseas, I picked up a copy of The Lord of the Rings, and I was just kind of enamored with it. And every once in a while, just for reading enjoyment, just I pick it up again, especially at night in bed, and read. I think I've read The Hobbit maybe 4 or 5 times, and Lord of the Rings I think I'm on my 4th time, and it's it's wild the world he created. From everything from the geology to the language to everything else is just amazing. I mean, the guy was unbelievable.
It leaves you changed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What about you, Sarah? Did you have anything you wanted to share about when you read it the first time? I think you said some comments earlier.
I read, the first thing that I read was The Hobbit, and because I liked it so much, I read the Silmarillion, because in my library, I read the library copy. In my library, we didn't have a copy of The Lord of the Rings, so I read The Hobbit, and then I read the Silmarillion. And I liked both, but it was kind of a shock. It was different.
Oh, that's deep wading into the water
That's like
there.
Dick and Jane to the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Yeah.
So, but once you read The Lord of the Rings through the first time, do you remember kind of what that feeling was like, or what it evoked in you? What was their sense of the story?
It was a bit like your experience. The first time I was kind of, I stopped too at the end of the tower, and I read the last book many months later, and It wasn't pity because I understood that I shouldn't have stopped. And when I read it again, years later, I read it, of course, from beginning to end, and I thought, this is it. It
Yeah.
could have done.
For sure. And Jeremiah, feel free to leave any comments on how old you were when you first read it and your experience. But I think Tolkien's definitely got something there. You never go back and have another first reading. But I do think, I guess, in defense of reading it to my children, instead of just saying, "Well, this is a really great book. You should read it when you're all an adult." I feel like wanting them to experience even just a little bit of the majesty of the story,
Yeah.
and that they kind of catch the idea that this is really good, and then that they can go back when they're older, and it's more likely that they would go back and read it on their own and then discover new things they never realized were there. And sometimes when you do that, when your parents read something to you as a child, you don't really get everything. But when you go back and read it yourself, it is kind of like a first time because it's
Yeah.
you reading it to yourself. So you might know about the characters, but it's new. Kind of like after having watched the movies, this last time I was made a promise. I'm not going to watch the movies until I've reread the books.
Yeah.
So I read them again, and then I went back and I've been watching the movies, and I got stopped partway through. But it's kind of like that where you're reading the books and you're thinking, oh, I forgot. You remember the big things like they changed what Faramir did, the plot had changed, but you forget there's some things in the movie that you're so used to that you expect them in the books and they're not there. And then this last time, what I noticed is that there were actually things that were in the movies, Peter Jackson movies, that I thought were just in the movies, but the line was taken straight out of the books.
Right.
And I was really surprised by, so it's kind of my own faulty memory.
Well, the funny thing is Chesterton made his comment about reading, and the first time you go through something, children, when they read something, they are excited with normal things. It's the extraordinary in adults that Tolkien was playing to.
Yes.
The idea was, he said, it's for a child, when a person goes on a trip, just going on a trip is enough of an adventure. But going on a trip to see a dragon, now that's what the adults want in their life, or affects them. I don't know how to put that, but
Yeah.
the impact is different because it's these extraordinary things that don't fit within normal everyday life.
Well, then I would say that is the essence of fairy, right?
Right.
That there is a sense of this is not ordinary, something different, something other, which is part of the beauty, I think. And so good.
Well, Chesterton said something about the rivers running with wine make the rivers running with regular water seem mythical, or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact quote there, but
Yeah.
it's kind of this idea that when you find out that the fairy forest exists, it uplifts all other forests in the world.
That's a
it's
really
a
great
weird-
quote. If you could find that quote for next
Oh.
month, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me when I came back. The last time I went to England was in 2015, and that's when I got to meet Jeremiah in person. But one of the things our family did is I wanted to take them to a place I'd been, which was Sherwood Forest, where Robin Hood, the legends of Robin Hood. And so I gathered like oak leaves, and I was like picking oak leaves in the forest. It's okay. I wasn't breaking any laws.
Oh.
But it's just lots of small trees too. And I wanted to bring back these oak leaves. So that fall, when I talked to my students, I said, Sherwood Forest is a real place. And I let them have an oak leaf from that forest so they could realize this is not just the stuff of legend. It is, but it's also using real places, that for Americans we think hardly exists. So when I talk about Rome, they're like, wait, Rome is still a real city now? Yes, it is.
Well, the thing is that we live in we're not in Europe. We don't have the castles that were built in 1535 or whatever. We don't have that
Right.
second layer of history that affects all of the geography.
Right.
You know, I mean, some of that in Washington D.C. Obviously, you know, some of the bigger you know, statues stuff that have been around, but nothing compared to like Italy. You know, you guys have Roman rocks still under your houses. I mean,
We do in Verona, we do. Yeah, they got Roman roads, and you know, when I took Latin in high school, you know, they said like there was 16 layers. Of course, they used the army when it wasn't out doing operations in all these other countries. But 16 layers of bricks or something, I mean, the roads are still workable today.
Oh yeah.
Actually, England's got Roman roads also.
Yeah.
The straightest roads in England were the ones that were Roman roads first, and they built on top of them. So, in fact, I think Jeremiah, where you are, Knutsford, I think that's not far from. I think that is Jerry.
Hello.
Is that you, Jerry?
Hi.
Jerry, isn't there a Roman road? I think the A49, doesn't that go past kind of where you live? I think there's a Roman road that goes past your area.
can't seem to hear us.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, I had the YouTube page open, so I was getting an echo. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. I was just asking, you were talking about Roman roads, and I said I think there's one that goes, it's not very far from where you are, the A49.
Yeah, right where the post office is, around the corner from me. There was a Roman fort, I believe. Yeah, and then right through the park that goes behind our house, there's an old Roman road.
Well, let's read letter 190, if that's okay, unless anybody else had a comment on reading. Jeremiah, how old were you when you read The Lord of the Rings the first time?
14.
Yeah, about the same for me. You probably got through the Two Towers, however, I had to come back to it later to actually read it all the way through.
I couldn't stop. I was, I read it in the back of a car, sort of. Every Friday we did a trip every Friday to go visit some family. That was my reading time in the back of the car every Friday. And but I only had one book with me at a time, so I can distinctly remember when I got to the end of the Two Towers and just lost my mind.
Yes, Frodo was alive.
Yeah.
Taken by the enemy.
That is one. I will say that is one thing that would be interesting. Kind of hold a little more suspense than Tolkien had in his book about whether or not Frodo made it.
Yep.
Like,
well, there was suspense, but let's go ahead and read 190 then, from a letter to Rainer Unwin on the 3rd of July, 1956. In June, the Foreign Rights Department of Allen and Unwin sent Tolkien a list of Dutch versions of place names in The Lord of the Rings that had been made by the book's Dutch translator, with the request, will you please send them back with, we trust your approval, ? I hope you and the Foreign Rights Department will forgive my now at length writing to you about the Dutch translation. The matter is, to me, important. It has disturbed and annoyed me greatly, and given me a good deal of unnecessary work at a most awkward season. In principle, I object as strongly as is possible to the translation of the nomenclature at all, even by a competent person. I wonder why a translator should think himself called on or entitled to do any such thing. That this is an imaginary world does not give him any right to remodel it according to his fancy, even if he could in a few months create a new coherent structure which it took me years to work out. I presume that if I had presented the hobbits as speaking Italian, Russian, Chinese, or what you will, he would have left the names alone. Or if I had pretended that the Shire was some fictitious Loamshire of actual England. And I don't have the footnote there, so...
It says, a term signifying an imaginary, quote, rustic county.
Rustic county. Yes, loam, of course, is an English word meaning soil, the kind of dirt that you can grow a farmer's crops in.
You grow dirt?
No, I don't grow dirt. You grow things in dirt.
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how you were making more loam. That's what I want to know.
Yes, the Shire is made of the loam. And
It sounds like
grows things in it.
sounds like foam.
Loam. No, loam.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help
It's
it.
good. It's the good kind of soil that you grow things in. Okay. Or if I had pretended that this Shire was some fictitious loam Shire of actual England, yet actually in an imaginary country and period, as this one, coherently made, the nomenclature is a more important element than in an historical novel. But of course, if we drop the fiction of long ago, the Shire is based on rural England and not any other country in the world, least perhaps of any in Europe or Holland, which is topographically wholly dissimilar. In fact, so different is it that in spite of the affinity of its language and in many respects of its idiom, which should ease some part of the translator's labor, its toponymy is specially unsuitable for the purpose. The toponymy of the Shire, to take the first list, is a parody of that of rural England in much the same sense as its inhabitants. They go together and are meant to. After all, the book is English, and by an Englishman, and presumably even those who wish its narrative and dialogue turned into an idiom that they understand will not ask of a translator that he should deliberately attempt to destroy the local color. I do not ask that of a translator, though I might be glad of a glossary where seldom the meaning of the place name is essential. I would not wish, in a book starting from an imaginary mirror of Holland, to meet hedge, duke's bush, eagleholm, or applethorn, even if these were translations of Skravenhage, Hertugenbosch, Arnhem, or Apeldoorn. These translations are not English, they are just homeless. Any comments on that so far? Okay. Otherwise, I can keep reading. We're on the third paragraph.
I wanted to show you the quote. I can't remember where it is in Orthodoxy.
Oh, this is from G.K. Chesterton, Orthodoxy. Fairy tales say that apples were golden only to refresh the forgotten moment when we found that they were green. They make rivers run with wine only to make us remember for one wild moment that they run with water. So in other words, make us more alive and aware to the world, the primary world.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's his Ethics of Outland, I think, is where it's taken from, but I'm not absolute. But it's an interesting read. G.K. Chesterton influenced Tolkien a lot.
Yeah.
Him and C.S. Lewis were.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Actually, the Shire map plays a very small part in the narrative, and most of its purpose is a descriptive buildup. It is, of course, based on some acquaintance with English toponymical history, which the translator would appear not to possess. Nor, I guess, does he know much of that of the Netherlands. Ouch. But he need not if he would leave it alone. The proper way to treat the first map is to change his title to Eendale on the Shire, and no more, though I suppose nar for two in such directions as to little delving would do no harm. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show the map. I brought along a map of the Shire. So hopefully you get a sense of that. Is it flipped, or can you read that?
I can barely make it out. I mean,
You can look
because
online.
I'm familiar with the map. I mean,
Yeah, sure. So you can at least.
Farthing, West Farthing.
Yep.
I can't see the words for Hobbiton or Bywater.
Right.
I see South Farthing, Barking. Yeah. But it's kind of difficult. But I know where it is.
Yes.
I've seen the map before. I don't know how around I guess.
For sure.
Yeah.
Someone's
Yeah.
dropping Eve back there.
So anyway, you can look this up, of course, on the internet. But I do notice that he says on the side of the map it says too little delving, and so he's saying, when it's like words like directions saying, this way, then translating that into Dutch makes a lot of sense. Can you take over for me? I'm going to check and see if Hawk's okay. So
I got one.
okay.
Where are we at?
We're at the translator has.
The translator has, on internal evidence, glanced at but not used the appendices.
Okay.
He seems incidentally quite unaware of difficulties he is creating for himself later. The Anglo-Saxon of the Rohirrim is not much like Dutch. In fact, he is pulling to bits with very clumsy fingers a web that he has made only a slight attempt to understand.
Keep going. Just keep
Uh,
going.
the
I'll
espe-
find it.
The essential point missed, of course, is even where a place name is fully analyzable by speakers of the language, usually in the case, this is not as a rule done. In an imaginary land, real place names are used, ones that are carefully constructed to fall into similar patterns. These become integral names, sound real, and translating them by their analyzed senses is quite insufficient. This Dutchman's Dutch name should sound real Dutch.
Well,
Uh,
actually, I'm no Dutch insufficient.
Well-
He's a Dutch scholar. That's what he said.
Well,
Not
actually,
a Dutch scholar and know little of the peculiar history of Dutch toponymy. I do not believe that as a rule they do. Anyways, lots of them are nonsense. Anyways, or wholly erroneous, which I can only equal by supposing that Matt Blooming, Newtown, Lake Howe, documents, Baconberry, Blushing, then discovering the author had written Florence, Naples, Como, Chartres, Hamburg, and Flushing, Dillising. I enclose the justification of my strictures, a detailed commentary on the list. I am sure the correct, as well for the publisher and translator, the more economical way to leave the maps and nomenclature alone as far as possible, but to substitute for some of the least wanted appendices a glossary of names. I could supply one for transition. May I say now once that I will not tolerate any similar tinkering with the personal nomenclature? Oh man. Boy,
I think,
they ask.
I think what you gentlemen just read is that Tolkien would not have been very happy with what Peter Jackson did.
Oh,
So,
what do you think? Can you name any examples?
say
Specifically?
again, please?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. If you speak up a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
My wife is unpacking stuff in the background and probably thinks I'm, playing hooky here.
That's okay.
You were saying about Tolkien getting, a little irritated by a movie. If he knew that the movie was that Jackson, his way of dealing with the material.
From what I understand, okay, you guys are the experts, but there's a purist camp and the not so purist camp.
Right.
Tolkien, as far as his work, I think was a purist, and may have not understood, the way things are done in Hollywood
Right.
or like Peter Jackson in New Zealand.
Well, he never wanted it to ever become play material. He didn't like the Shakespearean. It turned into a Shakespearean play because he wanted it to be the medium of a literary novel, the imagination that requires for literary reading is something that we don't have when we go to a play.
Yeah, well, but Tolkien was very open to cinematic adaptation to the point where he sold the film rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. I think United Artists back in 1968. So he was open to a cinematic adaptation, at least, but I think he would have wanted it to be done faithfully, probably chapter by chapter, which I think is sort of impossible to do, like at least a purely cinematic medium, because the movies would just be way longer than they actually became.
I'm amazed he didn't write a letter before his death, making sure to get all the niggling stuff out of the way before for the new movies coming out later on. Didn't actually get to see it. You said it? Which company had rights?
United Artists,
but they didn't get to finish theirs, did they?
No, I think they.
The only thing I've seen before Peter Jackson's work were cartoon adaptations of.
Yeah, there were the Rankin Bass and Ralph Bakshi adaptations in the 70s.
Yeah.
The Hobbit, Lord.
Yeah.
Back, you mean when I was born, Anthony?
Yep, when you old timers were.
Know your place, boomer.
Don't you start with me. Don't you start with
Gen
me.
X. Xers.
Thank you. I'm not. Oh, Lord, what mortals, what foolish mortals be, right? All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, Hawk, feeling well, so I was trying to help him out. So,
Letter or
yeah, let's finish or continue on. Where are you?
I couldn't imagine how intractable he could be about getting the language right. I couldn't imagine what that would be like.
Even in English. I mean, if he was bothered about how whether you spell the plural is it dwarves or dwarfs,
Yeah.
then translation
It's dwarves, and I know it. I
it's
wrote
going
it.
to be even harder. I kind of understand. I think he was a little bit nitpicky, but at the same time, language is so important. This is somebody who actually has a lot of knowledge of it. So I find it interesting that they would not have him consulted, but they probably also from Alan Number, they're like, if we have him consulting on everything, it's going to take us 10 years.
get the book
to get
published.
this
Not even get any
published.
money out of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So may I say now at once that I will not tolerate any similar tinkering with the personal nomenclature, nor with the name/word hobbit. Not have any more humpen, which I was not consulted, or any hubble or whatnot. Elves, dwarves, yes. Trolls, yes. They are mere modern equivalents of the hobbit and orc or of that world, and they must stay, whether sound Dutch or not. If you think I am being absurd, then I shall be greatly distressed, but I fear not altered in my opinions. The few people I have been able to consult, I must say, express themselves equally strongly. Anyway, I'm not going to be treated a la Miss Piggy Winkle equals poupée à l'épingle. Footnote there says,
Feature
anyway,
thought-
Conatang, Puddle Duck, several classes above this.
Yeah. Beatrix Potter, right? Not
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, another example is cane, duck, or etong, pool, pond. So anyways, back to the letter. It says, he continues, not that Beatrix Potter did not give translators hell, though possibly from securier ground than I have. I am no linguist, but I do know something about nomenclature, especially studied it, and I am actually very angry.
Oh boy, he's
I'm confused.
angry.
He didn't call himself a linguist. I'm kind of confused with what he's saying there.
I thought you were confused that he would be angry.
Well, he was a philologist.
No,
right?
I knew he was angry. You
No,
can tell
I
by the
know.
way he was writing.
No, I mean, saying not a translator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's how I took it.
and he's not like an expert on like modern languages. He's more.
Yeah.
So it's his depth, not his width, that he's
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, Brett. Okay, so comments on that letter. Any other ones?
Yeah, I could see how
You,
Oh, go ahead, Jeremiah.
I was just going to say you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of it, would you?
No. Oh.
Yeah, I could. It'd be really hard to really like proper name other languages because they're just so unique. And you kind of get I guess mainly they're just unique to the English language, right? But also to the invented languages like Mandarin. How would you translate some of those invented words? Italian or French or whatnot.
Yeah.
I can see why Tolkien would be peeved about that.
Well,
Translators.
sure, because I think at the end of the day, nothing's really all lingual, right? Everything comes out of it grows out of language. It's the loam that it grows out of, and I think names maybe most of all, right? It's more than personal names, more than even place names, are what is the essence of something. I mean, think about how Tolkien had that abandoned time travel story that he started, right?
The Lost Road.
Yeah, in The Lost Road. And I just find it really fascinating because he's dealing with this father and son and their names, which are equivalent meaning, but it's going back to Old English, I think. And so there's this sense of an ancient parallel because of the meanings of those names in the first place.
You know, with cars, you know how in our day and age, cars have names like Jaguar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the same thing with even baseball or football teams, right? We call them Pirates, or we call them, you know. And so, what does that mean? I mean, to us in that language, like that. I mean,
Sure.
that's just an example. But imagine it became old and it was repeated, but nobody remembered the original origin of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, sure. Lots of things are like that, actually, right? Many things in language. It's so funny to me because my fifth graders, you know, they're 10 years old, and we'll be talking American history about Pontiac, who was a chief, an Indian chief. But they hear Pontiac and they think car,
Yeah.
right? But it's this classic case where we name things after the primary name, so it's a secondary name, but often people later on may only know about, you know, the second name, because if you say Pontiac, most Americans are not going to say Indian chief,
Right.
right?
It's not the first thing.
Exactly.
What's your
So,
history buff?
and I think that's probably inevitable, right? History is just going to change. So, well, if there aren't any other comments on letter 190, are there any comments?
I've got one.
Go ahead, Gary.
You know, if Tolkien was writing this to a Japanese translator, the same thing as Dutch. I mean, Dutch is a Germanic language,
Yeah.
like English. And, you know, Japanese has such few sounds in it compared to other languages. And, I mean, Hobbit would be Hobbit. You know, you'd have to put T-O at the end, Hobbit. I mean, you just can't do it. And the only consonant I know that comes at the end of a word is for N, you know, So that's Japanese. And they didn't quite know with it. And they probably could translate it, but a lot of the names, if you wrote it in their language, it would not be pronounced like it was in English, like
So-
Hobbit.
So you're saying that it would need to at least be translated enough so that they could actually read it out loud.
Oh yeah. I mean, they would know. I mean, every school kid in Japan. I lived there for a long time. Every school kid in Japan is given, I forget how many years of English, which unfortunately, as far as knowing other languages, the Japanese pretty much tie the Americans. With us, because we don't have to, and you know, it's hard work to learn a language. And with them, because the sounds of it are so foreign and you know, difficult for them. And so it's, you know, you have to understand how they speak it and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're speaking the word Hobbit, and typically Japanese, and they probably could train themselves to do it, but you would come out Hobbit.
I think what's also interesting is when we consider this whole topic, we look at, say, this whole discussion, right, about common speech. And, you know, you have kind of the idea of the Lord of the Rings is this idea of, you know, that the Red Book of Westmarch was really where this all came from, and right, that it was passed on, and what we have now is kind of was assembled by the hobbits. I mean, there is this kind of he's kind of invented a backstory for how the story came together, and so when you look at names like Bilbo, you know, or Brandybuck, for example, those are not necessarily. There's a lot of things that have, even within his storyline, there's names that would have. Jeremiah, do you know what I'm talking about? It's where there's
I do, yeah. So Tolkien acted as within the narrative frame, he acted as the translator of the Red Book, so to speak.
Right.
So when we read the name Pippin or the name Merry or Frodo, within the original language of the Red Book, that wouldn't have been what their names are. And I don't recall where you can find those. They might be in the histories of Middle Earth, but they are out there. But yes, like Pippin's name is not Pippin, or wasn't Pippin. That's the translation.
Right. And yet at the same time for Tolkien, while there is that kind of imaginary sense in which he's kind of created, well, this is a facsimile, you know, this is the closest to what it would be understood as in the common speech or English. He kind of hints at that they were originally other things. Like the Rohirrim would be another good example where you do have these names. The names are clearly, you know, of another language. But when they're talking about places, there's other names for it as well. Anyway, so well, I guess there's one more thing I'd like to share and ask questions about, and then maybe if there's any other comments before we finish today. I do want to ask. Last month, I don't think when I was looking back at the video, I wasn't here, but it seemed that when you discussed a little bit about the Amazon, you know, kind of the latest chapter in, okay, what are they doing with the storyline, or is it you know, what does it seem to be developing into, you know, whether it be something that's more faithful or kind of strange kind of derivations. And I don't think you talked about the big reveal about the two trees.
Yes.
Did you talk about that last month?
No, we didn't.
Okay,
I don't
because
think
that's
we
kind
did.
of a big deal because it has to do with what they're going to actually cover. So I just wanted to
I have
refer.
a tendency to drag people down my rabbit trail.
It must be large rabbit holes, right, for us to be able to fit in rabbit holes, right? Is it the red or the blue pill? Well, anyway, I get stuck like rabbit in Infinity Pooh, right? So on the OneRing.net, Demosthenes, this is going back to August 6. There was an article called "Lord of the Rings on Prime declares its ambition." Anyone who tells you that they expected the first promotional image for the Lord of the Rings on Prime series to reveal an iconic panorama of Valinor, the land of angelic beings of Middle-earth, is either a liar or is inside the production. Because I'm certain that there was nothing in previously teased material and maps that even hints at Valinor. And then he says, what's more, this single image is as much of a statement as a certain someone recently flying to the very edge of space. I think he's referring to Jeff Bezos there. Or was it? No, it wasn't. It wasn't Jeff Bezos. It was
The other guy, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
Richard Branson.
No. Was
no.
it Branson? No, it was
The guy that
it was
Air X
Elon
or-
Musk.
Elon Musk,
Yeah.
Musk. That's
Anyway,
it.
does everybody know what we're talking about? It's the picture. It's this one with the two trees in the background. So you probably know what I'm talking about. It's the promotional information.
Yeah,
That
I
one.
saw, yeah, I
Right.
saw that.
So anyway, the article, and there's a lot more articles on this, but essentially I think it's all still kind of saying, well, we don't really know whether this is just kind of a flashback or what, but it seems to indicate that the First Age, even just perhaps only at the beginning, but at some point they are actually going to be going back to that part of the narrative now that they have the rights to it. I just wanted to get everybody's opinions on this.
Well, how about a foreshadowing flashback? In other words, it opens up narrating what this is all about and how it came about. You know, the genesis of Middle-earth, the genesis of Valinor, and all of that. I'm just suggesting something here. I have no idea whether it's right or not.
Right.
Maybe it'll be like the Back to the Lord of the Rings.
I mean,
Fellowship.
with Galadriel kind of
Yeah,
is the
narrator.
narrator.
Yeah.
In the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, and telling how the ring.
Hmm.
That's just speculation. But
Yeah.
I don't like to go down those rabbit holes. I think there's
Oh,
too
come
much
on now.
speculation.
Oh,
I don't like Amazon.
Come on, it's fun.
They're doing the Wheel of Time right now on top of doing Lord of the Rings, and I don't know whether I want to be that excited about something that I feel that Hollywood's probably going to mar.
well, it is a distinct possibility. talked to Sean Marchese from the Prancing Pony podcast last month, or actually July, about this again, and he had said he's cautiously optimistic. Whereas John Garth, do you remember Zara? So John Garth last year he was saying, he kind of takes a dim view. He's pretty sure it will not, because I think he was saying even if you have someone at the helm who's a good director, it will never be able to bring the splendor. And I think he's right. I mean, of course, I would agree with John Garth on that. However, maybe I'm naive, maybe, but I do think that it could be a good sign that they actually want to make sure they're not going Game of Thrones, right? Instead, they want to make sure that the proper sense of the cosmic battle, that because you have to get at Morgoth, right, in the Second Age, because this explains kind of the way things are. Why is there even a land of Numenor? You have to be able to explain that. So do you explain that just through words, or do you actually seek to show it? But of course, that's a great risk of not doing a good job with that. So Jeremiah, do you have any hard and fast opinions?
No hard and fast opinions. I'm a little bit like Sean, in that I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think I'm less optimistic than Sean. Maybe I'm just a bit of a pessimist. But I don't know. I think you could. I see your point about you can't just say here's the Isle of Numenor, not explain why it's important, why it was created, why it was given to men. But I think you could quite easily get away with introducing Sauron and very vaguely mentioning that as bad as he is, there was one that came before him, that was even worse. And I don't think you'd have to get into anything visual with that, and just almost in the classic sense of the original Alien movie. The less you see, the scarier it could be.
Yeah, less is more.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I agree with you there. That's nuance, and we're hoping that the director will do a better job at nuance than Peter Jackson. Which, I mean, Jackson had a lot of really great talent and did some things well, but I think say that nuance was not one of them. I mean, in terms of there's the fear element, right, with the black writers, and maybe this is just cinema, but I feel like nowadays we do a better job at showing dread more than like just absolute fear, like where you're just running, the whole time.
I think if it depends. I think if you're looking at like Jackson was with a 2.5 hour film, it's different than if you're trying to stretch it out across a series. You've got more time to be subtle.
Well said. Laura or Gary, any comments on this?
Not anymore. I just had that one idea, and that's. I'm waiting for next year at this time to see what they come up with. It's one of the reasons we keep our Amazon Prime subscription.
Do we have a release date yet on one?
Yes, it'll be next September.
September?
Season 1, 2022. Oh. Gotta wait a year. Yeah. Or you could cancel now and then just start it up again, next year.
Well, my wife uses it too much.
Yeah. Right.
So, but it's. I'm hoping it's going to be worth the wait. And one of the reasons it's so slow is because of the COVID virus.
It's true. Yeah.
And New Zealand has been very, very rigid in its tactics to keep that disease out.
Yeah, so production's moved to UK now.
Yeah, they finished season 1 in New Zealand, and they're filming season 2 in the UK. I think Scotland mostly, but I'm not sure.
So do you know whether there was like a falling out with the New Zealand government or something?
No.
Because they left the.
No.
I heard
afterwards?
I heard there was a lot of people that were really unhappy about the fact that Hollywood wasn't spending their money.
But
money in New Zealand,
Middle Earth, right?
Yeah.
No, actually, it's not.
Well, I just wanted to bring up one point, and then we're getting close to the end. I just think it's going to be interesting that we're going to get to see Sauron as a being, not just a huge clanking armor,
Yeah.
but a
Or-
human being
or an eye.
with a, he's not just some, I don't know what I want to call it. What was that? The Jewish thing that was made out of rocks or whatever that had
The
the
Golem.
yeah the
Golem.
golem. I mean, that's what I think of every time I see their version of Jackson's version of it always ruins it for me because it makes the people who watch the movie misunderstand that Sauron is a real person with a face.
Sure, Anatar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's had many versions, right? Any other topic that anybody wanted to bring up before we close?
Is Amazon targeting this series to like general public or mainly Tolkien fans? Both. What's the intended
Well,
They want it all.
I think a serious answer to that would be both, because without both, they can't recoup the money. I mean, really,
profit?
they've spent billions of dollars. However, I don't think. Well, I'm like Jeremiah here. My one thing I really hold against them is that they let go of
Tom Shippey?
Tom Shippey,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so when they did that, I really was concerned that they're going to go in a direction that's not honoring the legacy of Tolkien and his work. However, the length that they're trying to go to go back and look at the source material, that's reassuring to me. And so I think they will be. So nowadays, I suppose they would call it fan service. But I think when we're talking about money like this and with a story like this, they know they only really have one chance at this. So hopefully, the fact that you are creating, like Jeremiah mentioned, a story that's stretched over multiple episodes, and that hopefully will give them the opportunity to take their time with it. That's my hope. But much like translating a story into another language, I think translating it to the cinema will never take away our love for the books and never replace those. So I guess we'll leave it there unless anybody else had something else to share.
I think it's probably telling that they really want to cash in on the. And this is not a negative. I think it's just obvious that they want to cash in on the non-diehard fans by calling it Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, is that
It ties it into what the movie-going public know, and I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It does make good business sense.
It's true. Yeah.
it also makes story sense, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sauron is
It is, and this explains how the rings were made.
Yeah.
They've definitely got to get into that. So especially, I think when they put out the little teasers on Twitter, it was one stanza, or no, it was actually one line at a time. Of
Mhm.
of the poem. The line that's inside the ring.
oh yeah, one
The
ring,
ring
to
verse,
rule-
yeah.
Yeah.
one ring to rule them all.
One ring to rule them all. So they were net out one line at a time. So I really do think this is all about giving the backstory to how the rings were created, but they have a lot of room to explore. So we'll see what happens. Meantime, you'll find us here on the third Saturday of every month, exploring all things Tolkien with friends around the world. And we want to thank all those of you. Thank you, Gary, Zara, and Jeremiah, for joining us. The faraway lands of Italy, Great Britain, and Idaho. And here we are in Spokane, Washington. But wherever you are, be well. Namarie.
Namarie!
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Let me check it. I don't know where this-
Nick. Nick.
Dangerous to leave me in here with a hammer. Just
Yeah,
kidding.